Hello there everybody, I am Adam Welch and thank you for joining me back for another Contrastly video short. Today we're going to be taking a walk through Lightroom CC, that is Lightroom Creative Cloud, and you know what, I'm a little bit embarrassed that it has taken us so long to actually branch out and start talking a little bit more about Lightroom CC because, as you know, we have a ton of educational material for Lightroom Classic. That is the more or less the new version of the old standalone desktop version of Lightroom. We have the Lightroom Mastery ebook. We have the Decoding Lightroom video course. Everything you want to know about Lightroom Classic, but we don't talk too much about Lightroom CC. So that is all going to change today. And you know what? I have to say, I don't know why I don't use Lightroom CC more, because every time I use it, I love it. I really don't know. But anyway, we're going to take a look at Lightroom CC and talk about some of the things that have carried over from Lightroom Classic. In short, everything's still here. Everything is really just as it was in Lightroom Classic. Some things just go by a little bit different name, and a few things are in a few different places. So let's get started. And I'm going to be going back and forth between Lightroom CC and Lightroom Classic to show you just what I mean. Now, if we switch back over to Lightroom Classic for just a second, we'll see that we have our catalog, our folders, collections, everything over here to the left. That is still here in the same place in Lightroom CC, but as you notice, it is very much more condensed. Our import button is going to be the plus sign here. When you click that, that is going to bring up all the locations you have on your computer, your external hard drives, all that good stuff, but there's a slight change. And I'm just going to click an image here at random. I'll tell you what, let's click 2, 3, 4 images at random here. We hit review for import. This is going to give us another option to review the images that we're choosing to bring into the Lightroom catalog before we actually bring them in. This is really cool. I like this. We can add these to a collection, which is now albums. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But we are able to select or deselect any of these images that we might have changed our mind about before we actually bring them in to Lightroom. Pretty cool. So I'm not going to bring these in right now. If I wanted to do that, I would do add 4 photos, but I'm going to hit cancel instead. That's going to take us right back to the main window here in Lightroom CC. Moving down from our import option, we have these little books, kind of like books on a shelf, and that's more or less your library module now. It's called My Photos. If we click on that, it's going to expand, and we're going to have everything that we had in Lightroom Classic, but again, in a more condensed form. My Photos is where you're going to see everything in your catalog in Lightroom, all the locations. We can go by date, recently added, just how we can do that back over in Lightroom Classic. But the albums down here, these are your collections now. So when you see albums, think collections as it relates to Lightroom Classic. Now, as you can see, I have quite a few collections here in Lightroom Classic, not as many over in Lightroom CC, but they work exactly the same. We can even choose how we view the albums here in Lightroom CC, and if we click on this little plus sign and drop down, this would let us create another album or a collection, or create a folder. And a folder is just a place to store multiple collections or multiple albums here in Lightroom CC. It helps you keep things a little bit more neat, a little bit more organized. There's also another option here to the left. Again, we're not going to go in. It's just a huge amount of detail here today. This is more or less just a walkthrough of Lightroom CC. But Lightroom CC, as you know, is very cloud-based. It is very syncable between devices, and it is very shareable. It's very easy from Lightroom CC to share a lot of your photos with other people, with social media, between devices, and that's what this little icon right here will allow you to do. Again, more on that a little bit later. Next, we're going to talk about how we are viewing the images here in what is more or less the library module or the main window of Lightroom CC. I'm just going to double click on one here. You'll notice we still have the film strip here at the bottom to cycle through our images. Nothing's changed there. But if we look down here to the bottom left, this is how we're going to toggle between the different views here in the main window of Lightroom CC. Right now we are in the loop view, that is the single image view as we know it from Lightroom Classic, except here it is called the detail view. We have the old standard grid view, just as we had in Lightroom Classic, but now we have the addition also of the more or less a different version of the grid view, but here the images are a little bit bigger and they remain true to their original ratio, and it changes everything else around that. In this grid view, you can see the images are actually bigger. The ratios stay the same as far as the dimensions, but if we switch over to the old grid view, they're shrunken down to keep the dimensions the same. So it's a little bit harder to see. I really like this new version of the grid view in Lightroom CC, honestly more so than the one in Lightroom Classic. And of course we have this little grid size slider here. We can make those as large or as big as we want in either of the two grid views. We can choose how we sort the images in our grid view, or just sort them in general. We go by capture date, import date. All the options that we had over in Lightroom Classic are here as well. Here at the very bottom of the screen, we can rate our images, flag them, exactly the same as we did in Lightroom Classic. A cool thing that Lightroom CC does now is that you can still do the search, and I'm going to go back to Lightroom Classic. You can still do the library filter search, going by text, attribute, that is like your different stars or your flags, the metadata, choose the camera, lens, all that good stuff. All of this is still here in Lightroom CC. It's just a lot more streamlined. Look at this. You can choose to search by keyword or anything like that, and you can also click this little icon here, and that is going to drop down the exact same options we had to search with metadata, like our cameras, our lenses, locations, everything that we had over in Lightroom Classic. Just a very slick way of making a lot of these options hidden until you need them, and that makes for a lot more sterile experience in Lightroom CC over Lightroom Classic. And we're going to see how that really helps us out here when we start talking about our development, and that's what we're going to do right now. So I will say it one more time. Everything that we have available in Lightroom Classic more or less is available here in Lightroom CC. We're going to open up our basic development. That is these little adjustment slider, this little adjustment slider icon here, and you'll notice when we click on that, it automatically expands all of our adjustment options here. Think of this toolbar as a full-time solo mode when it comes to working with the different tools in Lightroom. And of course we have all of the familiar faces. We have our histogram up top. We have the ability to do an auto adjustment or black and white conversion. We're going to go back to this in just a second too. But then we have all of our regular exposure adjustments, our contrast, the shadows, the whites, literally everything that we had over in Lightroom Classic. A difference here is that Adobe has integrated the tone curve and added a little bit of spice to it here. I'm going to show you what I mean. If you, of course, this all is basically the same as it is in Lightroom Classic. We can go by each color channel, or the we have the way to adjust the levels here as well. If you click on this little, I guess you could call that a crosshair, but anyway, this little icon right here, we click on that, and it is going to open up this floating tone curve panel. And what's interesting about this, of course, you can move it around, that's interesting enough, but this is where we're going to have our HSL panel now, and our channel mixer, if you want to call it that, where we can adjust the individual hues, saturations, and luminances within our photos. The cool thing too, again, about this is if we go up and convert the image to black and white, this is the same area that we can adjust the black and white channel mixer. How cool is that? And we can toggle back and forth between the channel mixer, the HSL panel with the black and white mixer, and the tone curve with just a click. That is very cool. That may be one of my favorite things about Lightroom CC. I'm going to go ahead and convert it back to color as we move on. So our color panel, I'm going to click on that to open it up. That's just another way to get back into the HSL panel as we were doing with that floating toolbar panel here when we were in the tone curve. All that stuff still the same. I will mention though, you can see this looks a little bit clunky. We have an option, if we right click anywhere, we can change the layout from normal, which is what we're looking at now, to compact, and that is really going to shrink everything down. And that is, again, this is very intuitive, makes it a lot more streamlined when you're working with this in Lightroom CC. I really like the thought that's been put into this. Next we have effects. This is where texture, dehaze, clarity, vignetting, grain, that's where all of that stuff has been moved to. And this looks a little bit more simple than it does in Lightroom Classic. If we just go back over here to Lightroom Classic and we go to effects, you can see we have a lot of options here, more so than we do in Lightroom CC, but that is not exactly true, because if we click on these little arrows to show more options, that's going to open up all these same features for grain and vignetting that we have in Lightroom Classic. They're just hidden until you need them. Detail is where we're going to find our sharpening, noise, color noise reduction. Again, you have the same options, just clicking on that little arrow to show more options as you do in the same options you do in Lightroom Classic. And then optics, this is where it's what's going to be your lens corrections. You still have the option to work with lens profiles. It's just a little bit different the way you go about getting into there. You click on, well, in our case the default is none, and this opens up where you can check your lens profiles, apply different profiles that aren't applied automatically by Lightroom. This is where you do that. And of course you have the option to do everything manually as well, as far as your chromatic aberration, distortion, and lens vignetting is concerned. Geometry is going to be virtually exactly the same as Lightroom Classic. We have a little bit different layout here. We have the option to do that new guided upright feature that was introduced, I think it was in Lightroom Classic version 7.3. That feature is here, and we have all the other same features from Lightroom Classic for controlling the geometry, the aspect ratios, the scale of the image, but they've taken on their own panel here. That's the only difference. Okay, this is where we have our crop tool. It's moved over here to a dedicated icon in the tool panel. You just click these and you can see that basic development panel that's closed. You click on the crop tool, everything is here. I do like how Adobe has integrated that transform, where you usually would have to right click on an image. We're here back in Lightroom Classic. We would have to right click on an image, go to transform to rotate or flip. Here in Lightroom CC, you have dedicated buttons for that. That's really cool. It saves you some time, but other than that, everything else is the same in Lightroom CC as it is in Lightroom Classic as far as crop is concerned. The healing brush and the clone brush have their own icon now, their own little niche here in Lightroom CC. Everything is the same. Clone, heal. You have the selection there for size, feathering, opacity, visualize spots. That's our old buddy. That's still there. Nothing's changed. And again, it's just a little bit easier to get into, and plus they have added the touch mode. If you're not familiar with touch mode in Lightroom, that is just geared towards more mobile devices and more touch screen friendly operation of Lightroom. If you're like me and you have a touchscreen laptop, you can just use your finger like the mouse cursor to do all of your adjustments when you are in touch mode. The next three icons here are going to be our local adjustments. Everything, again, is still here. We have the adjustment brush, all the same edits that we could do in Lightroom Classic. You can do the same way locally in Lightroom CC. The same is true for the graduated filter tool. They call it linear gradient in Lightroom CC, and the radial gradient, which is the radial filter tool that we had in Lightroom Classic. All of that good stuff still there. Everything still applies with this, your local adjustments as far as how you feather, the size, how you can go in and erase or paint in the local adjustments that you've applied. Everything is exactly the same. It just has a little bit more intuitive Lightroom CC flavor now. So nothing big there. Just a few more things to go over real quick here in Lightroom CC. The very last thing in this tool panel is the three little dots here. If you click on that, that is going to be where all of your, more or less your right-click options that we had in Lightroom Classic, that's where these are going to be located now. Especially of interest is the Edit in Photoshop option. If you click on that, that's going to kick this over to Photoshop. You can do your more advanced edits there, and then when you close out and save, it brings it right back in to Lightroom Classic. A few options here, like showing the histogram, you can choose to do that or not. They're just going to open that back up again. But really all this is, again, is just a lot of those right-click options that we had in Lightroom Classic, like these, are now over in this little area in Lightroom CC. However, you can still right-click and have virtually all those options here in Lightroom CC as well. And last, but oh certainly not least, we have our presets. And if you'll notice in Lightroom CC, we have this big, beautiful, huge preset button right down here at the bottom of the screen. You click on that, that is going to open up your preset panel. I'm happy to say that all of your presets that you have either purchased, borrowed, made yourself, everything from Lightroom Classic as far as presets and profiles are concerned is fully compatible with Lightroom CC. Everything is going to be listed right here, more or less just how it was back over in Lightroom Classic in the preset panel. So here in Lightroom CC, as far as presets go, you would click these little three dots. That's going to open up your preset management tab. That's going to let you create your presets, manage your presets, import everything that you can do in Lightroom Classic as far as presets are concerned. It is exactly the same here in Lightroom CC. You click import presets. It's set up the exact same way. You would choose your presets, click import. That would bring them in. Of course, the creative profiles, we have some of those over at Contrastly as well. All of those are going to be working here. You would import those exactly the same way as you do in Lightroom Classic, and you would browse the profiles the exact same way as you do in Lightroom Classic as well. So nothing's changed there. That's great because a lot of us, myself included, was worried when Adobe changed over from the LR template presets to the XMP format. That was causing some problems that we didn't know if it would work with Lightroom CC, but fortunately it does. And of course, everything is going to be working with Adobe Camera Raw as well. So you have cross-platform functionality with all of your presets now, and that is incredibly cool. And before we go, I will tell you something else about the way presets work with the cloud format here of Lightroom, the Lightroom CC. If you load your presets into Lightroom CC, how we showed you there. Let's say you import your presets to Lightroom CC, or you create some presets in Lightroom CC. If you have your syncing turned on with your devices right here with the cloud, you can connect your devices, sync everything. Not only will that sync your photos across the platforms, but that will put your presets over onto, let's say, your mobile device. Now, one caveat to this, you can actually sync your Lightroom Classic with your Lightroom CC. And if you do that, all of the presets that you have either imported or made in Lightroom CC will actually sync back to Lightroom Classic's preset folder. Now, that does not work retroactively, meaning you can't create your presets in Lightroom CC, have it sync with Lightroom Mobile or Lightroom CC, and have those presets show up there. It just doesn't work that way. They have to be somehow made or imported into Lightroom CC for it to be able to sync across all of your platforms. So the more you know there about syncing your presets. Alright folks, that has been a brief walkthrough of Lightroom CC, that is Adobe Lightroom Creative Cloud. Again, I don't know why I don't use this more than I do. Whenever I do use it, I love it, but I guess, you know, old habits die hard. If you have used Lightroom CC, please let us know what you think about it and whether you would like to see more information about it either here on the YouTube channel or over on Contrastly.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts on it as always. And if you have any questions about anything related to Lightroom or even photography in general for that matter, please feel free to post them in the comments, send us an email. We'd love to help you out. And again, you know, we love hearing from our folks out there. So until next time, this has been a Contrastly video short. I am Adam Welch. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining me, and we will see you next time.